This is Justice Now, a BET News special with your host, Marc Lamont Hill.
Good evening. A little over a week ago, the country was in an uproar when George Floyd, a man from Minneapolis, Minnesota, an unarmed black man, was killed by police. Since that day, the country has been overwhelmed and torn apart by pain, protest, and anger. For Black Americans, this pain is not new. For far too many generations, we have been the victims of racist violence. And with every step forward, we have had to fight for justice. How do we turn our pain into progress? And how do we heal in this moment of anger? Tonight, we turn to some of the leading voices in our community, including activist Tamika Mallory, Senator Cory Booker, Pulitzer Prize winner Nikole Hannah-Jones, and John Legend. I'm joined right now by, of course, we all know T.I., the actor, the entrepreneur, and of course, the Grammy Award-winning rapper. And we have with us Eddie Glaude, who is the chair of the Department of African American Studies at Princeton University. Thank you both for joining me. Tip, I'm going to start with you because you're in Atlanta, and a lot's been happening in Atlanta right now. What are you seeing in Atlanta that helps us understand what action should look like?
I think the most important thing is that young people are sticking together and people are fed up, people are tired. There may not be the perfect way to explain that, but these are perfect times that we're living in. I think that, whatever it is, doing nothing is not, it's not enough.
There are some people from the old guard civil rights establishment and some young folk on the ground who are saying that there are some actions that are actually harmful. People talk about rioting, people talk about looting as things that are problematic. What do you make of that?
Well, it's the typical, if those of us who've read history, it's the typical response to this sort of mass mobilization, right? To take specific acts of violence or looting and then to begin to paint a broad brush of the actual protest. And so what we find ourselves doing is focusing on the quote unquote violence and not focusing on the act which precipitated the protest. Mainstream media have been principally centered and focused around, smoke pluming from burning cars or people breaking into Chanel, as opposed to thinking about what does it mean that we just got an independent autopsy report that actually went against the county examiner's autopsy report with regards to George Floyd dying of strangulation, right? What does it mean to begin to talk about, when we talk about actionable items, qualified immunity that basically protects police officers from when they do wrong? What does it mean for us to begin to talk about decriminalization? So we got to figure out how to disrupt the encounter between police and everyday ordinary citizens. We need to begin to talk about how to change fundamentally the way in which we encounter these police, because the death of George Floyd is a consequence of daily policing that's gone wrong, if you understand what I mean. That they engage in excessive force and then they mess up and kill somebody. But they're engaging in excessive force every day and every night when they police our communities, at least in my view.
How do we get to the end goals that Professor Glaude is talking about from the position of the street? Like, we're on the street, we're making demands. Peaceful marches don't always work. Looting doesn't always work.
Purpose and direction of your action is like the most important thing. The one, I probably shouldn't say this, but I will. The one most beautiful thing that I have seen in this whole ordeal of the demonstrations that have been carrying on since Friday night was seeing the Minneapolis Police Department burn. Seeing that police station, that actually made sense because they were the culprits. You understand? It is their lack of action that led to, all of these demonstrations. Well, I understand we have an opportunity to go and get ourselves some luxuries that we haven't been able to afford because we've been oppressed and haven't been given the same opportunities. So now we're going to get it for free. Okay, cool. I get that. But if we're fighting for oppression, if we're fighting to bring justice for George Floyd, that to me doesn't seem like, a direct answer to that.
But what combination of stuff do we need to be doing? How do we tactically think about where to go? Because a lot of young people are listening to you in your direction. And if you say go, they're going to go. If you say pause, they may pause.
Atlanta is the capital of Georgia. And if you're going to, quote unquote, burn down Atlanta, the greatest monument of white supremacy is 30 minutes east at Stone Mountain. Okay? You have the Marietta Square where black people were hanged like regularly. You see what I'm saying? Like about 20 minutes north. You have Brunswick, Georgia, where Ahmaud Arbery was just slain. Like you have so many other more significant places to start with that type of rebellion.
This is an official BET programming note. For clarity, T.I. is not suggesting that people go out and burn those things. He's simply saying that as a matter of strategy.
I'm just saying we have to channel our effort, energy, and our action. Okay.
Professor Glaude, what do you say to that? Because that's what a lot of people are saying. Stealing out of a store in your neighborhood, burning down a house in your neighborhood, or getting, for example, a luxury item isn't about George Floyd. It's about personal gain. Is that an accurate analysis, or is it more complicated than that?
I think it's a combination of things. So look, in the midst of 40 million unemployed, in the midst of a healthcare crisis where we're losing our loved ones disproportionately, rent relief is about to end, unemployment benefits are about to end, and you have people making billions of dollars in the midst of this crisis, which in other words, it reveals how profoundly skewed, right, our economic system is, where the 1% and top 1% are gaining all of the wealth while everyday ordinary people are busting their behinds and can't even get a living wage. There was one guy in New York who said, well, hell, if he can get away with killing a black man, I can get away with stealing an iPhone. Now that sounds simple, but it's also a commentary on how the law of order rhetoric is being invoked for some people. But for the last 3.5 years, we've seen Trump and his minions flout law and order day in and day out. Don't give a damn about democratic norms. Don't give a damn about law. So what we're seeing here is layered. It's George Floyd has become a proxy for a whole range of things that are happening in this country. And so there's the issue of police brutality that black folk are experiencing. But there's also this economic devastation caused by COVID-19 that we got to keep in mind, that's complicating and nuancing how people are behaving out in the streets right now.
Although this program is for black folk to talk about what our issues are, our agenda, and how we can navigate this process, one of the lingering questions always is, what do we tell white people, what particularly white allies? What should they be doing to advance this struggle? Professor Glaude?
I'm always reading Jimmy Baldwin, and James Baldwin is very clear. We're not the problem. He has this wonderful formulation. It's powerful. Excuse my language. He says, "I'm not a nigga. I never was. Never have been." The question is that you have to figure out why you needed to invent it in the first place. So the problem is not us. The problem is a conception and an idea of whiteness that leads these folk to organize a society in such a way that devalues those who aren't white. So if we're gonna fix this thing, they're gonna have to deal with how the depths of white supremacy and how it colors the way they see the world.
The white people who consider themselves our allies, we have to explain to them, the difference between them and the white supremacists that we're fighting against. Because a lack of information, a lack of experience, a lack of exposure kind of makes them oblivious to certain points. But then, as I've been saying in these demonstrations, in other places, we have to tell our allies who happen to be white, thank you, because they're out there using their privilege to our benefit. You know what I'm saying? I've seen images of white women, men and women, shielding black protesters from honorary police. This is a war against white supremacy, by fair and decent against indecent people. I don't for 1 second think that being white makes you evil and being black makes you righteous. I am proud to death of this generation that has taken this movement and made it their own. I think that it has been a long time coming. And I think that people like all three of us have to find ways to support the movement. I don't want to seem as though I'm overtly critical. I still just feel that we all have to do a better job at creating the proper forms of leadership so they aren't just out there acting without cause, acting without purpose, and moving without direction. I have a different idea of how to get those things done, but we're all fighting the same fight. We're on the same side, and we have the same enemy.
That's a great point. And your point about being critical is right. It's okay to be critical. It just has to be loving criticism. And we love this generation. We love the work that's happening. And we all trying to get in the same direction. T.I., thank you for joining me. Eddie Glaude, thank you for joining me. We'll be back in a minute with more. We have so many more important voices tonight coming up, including activist Tamika Mallory, Senator Cory Booker, Pulitzer Prize winner Nikole Hannah-Jones, and John Legend. Please stay with us. Welcome back to Justice Now. One of the key questions we're wrestling with at this moment is not just how do we repair the damage that's currently done, but also how do we move forward. Many people have looked to the election in November as one of the key ways for us to get justice in the long term. To have that conversation, I'm joined by two incredible guests, Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey and activist Tamika Mallory. Thank you both for joining me. Tamika, I'm going to start with you because you're on the ground right now dealing with these issues as an activist. What role does the election play potentially in helping us get where we want to be?
I think, Mark, first of all, how are you? And of course, the senator, thank you so much for, being able to be a part of this conversation today. I think that is probably the most important part of this entire process, that we're leading towards an election. And if people want to ensure that we go from protest to something that is like real, something that is going to be substantive, and something that we can really control, we've got to be looking at the election. We have to also be clear that all of what we see happening in our streets and on American streets is not disconnected from the rhetoric that we have seen coming from the White House. And we've got to really understand the direct connection and be ready in November to vote like we've never voted before. And so I think that this is a critical time for us, and that this election is going to be one of the most important elections of most of the young people who are out there on the ground.
Senator Booker, one of the things Tamika just talked about was the response that people are getting from the White House in particular regarding what happened to George Floyd, but also regarding what happened when protesters began their uprising. What do you make of the White House's response to this?
Look, I don't give attention to the White House more than I have to. He is not the center of the focus right now. The center of the focus is the people, the hurt, the pain, the frustrations that have been building up for decades. Because I had a great president before this one, but he seemed to have to come out time and time again and speak towards these kind of injustices. So Tamika is right. Donald Trump gets way too much of our attention and our emotional energy, because what King said is right. It's not the vitriolic words and violent actions of the bad people, but the appalling silence and inaction of the good people that we must really repent for.
Tamika, I'm hearing a lot of noise in the background, and it's good noise. Tell me what that is.
It's so funny, Mark. We are in such a strange time. I'm dealing with protests in New York City, where people are getting ready to hit the streets, even though there is an 11 p.m. curfew that has been put into effect. So we're dealing with that. But at the same time, as we're in this pandemic, what you hear is the sound of people saluting essential workers. At 7 o'clock in communities all over New York, people begin to clap and play music and celebrate essential workers. So we're caught in the middle of so much happening in this country. But people are still, even though they may be hurting and they may be broken, they are still trying to be hopeful and to ensure that, again, as our senator has said, that the people know that they are centered in this movement and that this is really about them. So I'm going to be clapping and protesting at the same time tonight.
Well, we need that from you. Tamika, while I got your audio, let me ask you one more question. And Senator Booker, I'd love for you to follow up with this. Black folk are dealing with one of the most tragic paradoxes that I've seen, and that is we have to decide between staying at home and doing nothing in the face of racism or going outside and risking our lives in the midst of COVID. How do we navigate that? What should we be doing? What do you say, Tamika?
I say we still have to love up on one another, Mark. Like it's one thing to chastise our young people for some of their actions and some of the things that we're seeing that we know we do not condone. But it's something else for this movement to pull our young people to the side, to talk to them and to try to provide direction. I think that's one thing. I think we also have to be out here registering people to vote, educating them on the process, and helping them understand that there is an end game so that our people do not get hopeless where they feel like we can never win. We've got to let them know that winning is possible, but it's going to take unity and it's going to take people in the streets, and that they should not feel that this movement is not working. All that we have seen happen in the last week around the George Floyd case, and not just George Floyd, also Marbury and Breonna Taylor, we've been seeing movement and things happen because people have been engaged. So folks need to just stay vigilant and stay out here, continue to work and have conversations with the people that are not doing things the ways in which we feel it should be done, and pull them in. Don't call them out, call them in.
Senator Booker, before you were Senator Booker, you were Mayor Booker. There are mayors all around the country right now who are calling for activists, for protesters to be completely nonviolent, to obey the curfew orders. How do we navigate civil disobedience, but also keeping our cities safe? How do you make sense of that?
It makes no sense to burn down that which has taken so long to build up, especially in Black communities. Many of the Black-owned businesses, many of the businesses that support and sustain minority communities, it makes no sense. So violence, the kind of burning and looting, that's unacceptable. But I feel in a comfortable place talking about that, condemning that, because I am also condemning the violence against Black bodies that is happening in this nation. Can you drink your water without worrying about lead poisoning? Can you breathe your air without worrying about your children getting asthma when children in wealthier or suburban towns don't have to worry about that? Why is race in this country still the number one determinant whether you live around toxic sites? How do we get out of this trap that we are in, to have a society that sustains such high levels of violence, where we put our children in solitary confinement, where we shackle pregnant women, where the land of the free has so many people that are incarcerated, one quarter of the globe's population, even though we're only 5% of the globe. And that's really what I want to get at and have us do. So I believe that there is a constructive way to protest, that you still should use your rage, use your anger, and channel it into the kind of means that are going to help us to achieve our ends. The people burning and looting, they are weakening our movement for justice. They are undermining that. But I will never be one of those people that is lopsided and imbalanced in my condemnation. Because to me, if you are silent in the face of the other types of violence, then you are complicit in it.
Thank you, Senator Booker. Of course, Senator Booker is the former mayor of Newark, and he's the first African-American senator from New Jersey. And we were also joined by Tamika Mallory, who is a board member of the Gathering for Justice and national co-chair of the Women's March. Thank you both. More important voices to come. Stay with us. Welcome back to Justice Now. I want to start with Emerald Garner. She is the daughter of Eric Garner, who famously was killed by New York City police. Emerald, thank you so much for joining us. Your father famously was known for uttering those words, "I can't breathe." When you see this happen again on video, on the internet, how does that make you feel? How do you respond?
Well, I first want to give my condolences to the family. I know exactly what the pain that they're going through. I did not watch the video. I did not watch my father's video until 2019. It was very hard for me to watch, and just seeing the clips took a piece of me and it took a piece of my heart. I don't think that it should be played repeatedly on a reel as my father's was, because ultimately it takes a piece of you until you are no longer here. For example, my sister Erica died of a massive heart attack at 27, and she watched the video from the first day, and she watched it multiple times. And you can see the demise, and she ultimately ended with having a massive heart attack.
How have you managed to cope dealing with not just the trauma of your own father's tragedy, but watching the string of deaths that we've seen since? How do you personally manage?
After my father died, I didn't have time to mourn. I didn't have time to take a self-care day. I just went straight into, I need to go to every media outlet and I need to tell my story, and I need to make sure that my father's voice is heard. And that's absolutely the biggest mistake that I've made, which was not mourning my father and not have taken that time to process what was going on and just jumping straight into interviews and different things of that manner. After my sister died 3 years later, I learned my lesson. We went to family therapy. We spoke to different therapists, people who were actually still around after the cameras went away. I would call them. I would get advice from them. I would talk to them. And that's what really ultimately eased my mind was, knowing that I had the support, knowing that I took time to take care of my mental health and having a support team.
Absolutely. There's so much to be said about mental health and support in a moment of trauma and a moment of crisis. I want to turn to Peniel Joseph. He's a professor at University of Texas at Austin. As a nation and as a community, we've had to deal with tragic deaths. When we have pain, family members feel it, but also the community that loves those people feel it. How historically have we dealt with these issues of pain and trauma?
Well, I think we've dealt with them in both nonviolent ways, but also at times through eruptions. Dr. King's death is very instructive. His assassination is going to inspire 125 cities to erupt in protest, in memorial, but also in anger and outrage that King could be assassinated.
What if we saw, though, that Jim Crow segregation all day, every day on our timelines, right? What if we didn't just mourn Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and we didn't just have those still pictures in the Audubon Ballroom or on the balcony of Lorraine Motel, but we actually had live video footage and we watched it over and over again? Should we be watching these things? Do they have the damage? Do they have the potential to do so much more damage?
Mark, I watch these videos, I think out of a sense of obligation that I have to. I don't watch them multiple times, but I do think they're giving and doing incalculable harm on the Black community. And I think that in a lot of ways, the more we see George Floyd and really Eric Garner and others, Black women as well, Sandra Bland, Corinne Gaines, Breonna Taylor, the more we see these deaths, the more in a lot of ways we get desensitized to Black life and the value of Black life. And I also think when we see these killings on social media, we aren't sensitive to the families of people who are being killed.
I want to bring in Nikole Hannah-Jones. I'm proud to say for the first time, the Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist who is responsible for the 1619 project that was brought to New York Times magazine. Nikole, thank you for joining us, although very unfortunate circumstances. One of the things you've helped us understand is the journey from slavery to present. That journey is filled with trauma. How do we as a community deal with this question of collective trauma, collective pain, and how do we heal?
I mean, I think what's so hard about this is we know that racism kills. It doesn't just harm the spirit, it kills the body. Racism and the stress that comes from it increases toxic stress in our bodies. And there have been scientific studies that racism actually shortens the Black lifespan. There's things that are in our control, which is trying to seek mental health services, going to our churches, trying to grieve and talk to our family members. But what's out of our control is the way that this actually affects our body. So I think we're in a terrible position because we don't control what is necessary to change the circumstances that will alleviate our own stress, and understanding that so much of this work is about showing white Americans that they need to change the circumstances in which we live. And that is a very helpless situation.
What can we tell our children? How should we talk to our children about this system that says we're not human beings?
This is one of the hardest things as a parent, because on the one hand, and I have a 10-year-old daughter, we've talked about racism pretty much as long as she was old enough to understand things. I think we have to, as Black parents, be very honest with our children about the world that they face, but also what we all try to do is tell them that I will try to protect you, that mommy and daddy are going to try to keep you safe, but these are the things you have to know about this world. And this is what's really depressing is, we have to tell our children things that white parents don't. We have to give our children this armor that white parents don't have to give their children. And in a way, it takes away some of their childhood. But what choice do we have? This is generational. This is 400-year-old story of being Black in this country, is having to prepare our children for a life that other Americans don't have to deal with.
Absolutely. Our job here, and not just tonight, but moving forward, is to find a way to change that reality so that our children and our children's children will be able to enjoy a world that's more free and more safe and more humane for everybody, but especially for our community. Nikole Hannah-Jones, thank you so much. Dr. Peniel Joseph, thank you for joining us. And Emerald Garner, thank you so much. And again, our condolences go out to you as you continue to deal with and heal from the trauma that you were forced to deal with. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Coming up on our BET News special, Justice Now, John Legend. Welcome back. I'm now being joined by Stephen Jackson. He is a retired NBA player of 14 seasons, and more importantly, he was a close friend of George Floyd. Stephen, thanks for joining me.
Oh, man, my pleasure, Mark. Good to see you.
The first thing I want to say to you is my sincere condolences to you. I know how close you all were. Talk to us about that relationship.
It started probably 23 years ago. Around that time, I was still at the end of my high school years, and a friend of mine named Telly Joyce, rest in peace, he came, he was on the basketball court. He was like, man, my partner from Houston coming out here. Man, y'all look just alike, bro. Y'all look just alike. I'm like, all right, cool. So he ends up bringing him. As soon as he walks, the first thing our first reply to each other was, who your daddy? Who your daddy? and from that moment, yeah, exactly, because we look just alike. And from that moment, it just became a brotherhood. I think what I'm gonna miss most about him, Mark, like he was a different type of dude. And I'm gonna miss that genuine friendship because you don't have too many friends like that these days.
You didn't just sort of cry at home or be upset at home. You made a very public Instagram post or you went live and we could see your pain. Everybody could see your pain. How have you been dealing since that moment emotionally?
You know, I can't even lie. I don't know how I'm doing. Because since I've got here, I've been going, protesting, marching, being with everybody in Minnesota, you know, just trying to make my presence felt and let them know that we're here for my brother. I think once we get convictions for all those guys and things kind of slow down and the funeral is over, then I'll probably start to catch some feeling. But right now I'm numb. I'm numb because not only is what happened to my brother the world had to see during the press conference, I'm sitting there listening to Philando Castile mama. I'm sitting and listening to all these mothers that lost kids. I'm sitting and listening to Ardell Sherrill mom whose son died in the police custody and she's not getting no answers. You know, so it's their pain just fell up on me. So Gerald, I'm embracing it, man, and a feeling that's coming over me that I didn't expect. I came here just to fight for my brother, but now I feel it's my duty to fight for other people.
I'm so grateful that you're doing that. I'm so grateful that you're struggling with us. My last question for you, brother. What do you want the world to know about George Floyd that we don't already know?
That he died trying to be a protector and a provider for everybody. That was his role. That's what he cared about. He was one of those guys, you know, growing up in our neighborhoods, when all the neighborhoods are beefing and you can't go nowhere, he's the only guy that can go to every neighborhood. That's the type of guy he was. And what I hate the most is a person that showed so much love have to die from somebody with so much hate. That don't add up. That'll never sit right with me.
It's not going to sit right with any of us, but we're going to keep fighting in his memory and we're going to get justice. Stephen, thank you for joining us. And again, my deepest condolences to you.
Man, no problem. Hey, I'm calling you, bro. I need you to educate me. I will be reaching out to you.
I got you, my brother. I got you. One of the things that's incredibly important when we talk about the current moment is what's happening on the front lines. And so I'm joined by some frontline organizers and activists who really understand what's going on. I want to start with Michael McDowell. He's one of the original founders of the Black Lives Matter chapter in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Michael, thank you for joining us. What are you seeing on the front lines?
So what I'm seeing right now in Minneapolis is there's a lot of Black youth leading on the front lines, and specifically a lot of Black youth and Black femmes out there. And that's definitely getting lost in the media. And I'm also understanding that this is not an isolated event. This is the reaction to a system that's been inherently violent since the beginning. And this trickles over into, you know, not having funding for housing, communities being historically divested in. It's not an isolated event. This is a reaction to a system that's been violent in many different ways.
I want to bring in Luis Hernandez. He's an activist with the Gathering for Social Justice. It's a social justice organization that was founded by civil rights icon Harry Belafonte. Luis, thanks for joining me. How do we figure out when this moment ends if it's not just about an isolated incident?
What we see right now is that young folks are on the front line because of these systems of white supremacy, because of these systems that exist that allow folks like the murderers of George Floyd to go unchecked, to continue to act with impunity. There's both policies to be fought for, and there's complete system-wide change that we want to see across the country as it relates to police accountability and police transparency.
That's a great point. And let me loop in Derrick Johnson, of course, the president of the NAACP. These activists on the ground, and certainly Michael and Luis right here, especially, have been talking about how interconnected these issues are, that it's about Ahmaud Arbery, it's about Christian Cooper getting stopped in Central Park, it's about Breonna Taylor being killed at home, but it's also about COVID-19, it's about poverty, it's about unemployment, it's all connected.
You know, it's unique. In December of 2019, the NAACP, we released a report on the economic standings and conditions of the Twin Cities. And we found in a report that the Twin Cities, the life for African Americans was worse than many African Americans across the country, including states like Alabama. So what we are seeing in that city is long-standing systemic racism that's been structuralized, institutionalized, and that's overlapped with aggressive policing. But we also have to have the wisdom of the past, because we know others are trying to embed themselves in our protests to create a distraction from what the real issues are for African Americans.
Even those who are peacefully protesting are at risk, not just from the police, but also from COVID-19. Many of us, as we get a little bit older, start wondering, wait a minute, we want you to be out there protesting, but we're worried about your health.
I think for us young people in particular, we understand that police brutality and the system change that we need is a bigger issue. I think while COVID-19 is an ever-going and ongoing crisis that has claimed the lives of over 100,000 people in America, we also know that police brutality is something that's also claimed the lives of so many folks in America. And we're at a time right now where it's more important for us as young people to be on those front lines, to be demanding justice, even amidst the ongoing pandemic.
Black people have been protesting forever. We're never going to stop. As long as there's oppression, we're going to resist it. But for the young people on the ground right now, what would make this a successful action? When would this sort of phase of our resistance be wrapped up?
We're calling for a divestment in police. So we're saying, one, to never again vote to increase the police budget or to increase the police department's budget in any way. Because right now we're seeing that the police budget is significantly higher than like the budget for public housing, to protect and expand current investment in community-led health and safety strategies instead of investing in police. And we're also asking to do anything in our power, their power, elected officials locally here, to compel MPD and all law enforcement agencies to immediately cease enacting violence on community members. So we have some specific demands, and those are some of them. And
President Johnson, I'm going to give you the last word here. Michael and Luis have laid out clear demands. They've laid out a clear political agenda that many young people have in this country, certainly the activists on the ground do. What can organizations like the NAACP and other folk do to support young people on the front lines of this issue?
Movements are never one generational, they're always intergenerational for them to be successful. And so what we're looking at now is a rebirth, a re-energizing of social justice movement in a way in which the energies of the young people are on. Organizations like NAACP can provide support and advisement. I have not intentionally gone to Minneapolis because I have a 28-year-old dynamo leader there who's a strong voice, who understands that we're not in a competition. In Georgia, we have a 26-year-old state leader on the ground with President Woodall, who's done a great job with the Ahmaud Arbery case. That's the role of organizations like NAACP. Forward also use this moment to direct that energy for the outcomes that's necessary. We are done dying. And all of this is related to an election in 2016 and racism germinating from the White House. It is our opportunity to hear the voices that are on the ground and funnel that energy to November so we can make the change, be the change that we're looking for. We're done dying.
From your lips to our ears and our feet. Let's make this happen on the front lines and all around the country. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining. Up next, I'll be joined by John Legend. Welcome back to Justice Now. And now for our final conversation of the night, I am fortunate to be joined by John Legend, the philanthropist, the activist, and of course, the brilliant Grammy Award-winning musician. John, good to see you, man.
Good to see you, Mark.
We are in a crazy moment right now, and a lot of people are looking to people like you for answers, not just political answers, but understanding of like, how can we better see ourselves in this moment? How can we better be seen in this moment?
Well, first of all, we have the right to be angry. Don't let anyone tell you that we shouldn't be angry, that we should be okay with what we're seeing, that we keep having the same conversation over and over again, that we keep having to affirm the fact that our lives matter. That should be the bare minimum we should expect from this country and from this world. But we still have to keep affirming that to people. And so that should make us angry, that we have to keep affirming that the system keeps telling us that our lives aren't worthy of value. And if the system keeps telling us that, we have to angrily and with righteous indignation say that our lives are worth something, and we have to work to change the system so that in systemic ways, we show that we value our lives and that the system should value our lives.
How can we take that righteous indignation and outrage that you're talking about and mobilize it in ways? Of course, some people are taken to the streets. What are some other things that can be done?
Well, let's just think about what's happened in the last few years. You know, we had when the Black Lives Matter hashtag was born several years ago in response to Trayvon, in response to Michael Brown and all these other incidents where we lost our young men and women. We have actually made progress since then. That doesn't mean we fixed the problem, but let's look at what we've done in criminal justice reform. We've seen across the country, places like Chicago, places like Philadelphia, elect way more progressive prosecutors. And those prosecutors are the ones who are making the charging decisions. They're the ones deciding whether or not to pursue police officers who use extrajudicial violence against our citizens. They're the ones deciding whether or not to charge a misdemeanor or a felony to one of our young people that get caught up in doing something wrong. And the fact that we as a movement have been able to elect more progressive prosecutors in some of our most populous cities in the country is progress. One of the things that we're talking about now is defunding the police. And it sounds like a radical thing. But we've come to the realization that there are just too many police, and they're occupying Black and brown neighborhoods, and they're not productive. They're not edifying our neighborhoods. They're making things worse. And every time we spend money on hiring another police officer, every time we spend money arming them like they're military officers, every time we spend money so that they can have tanks and all this riot gear, all these things that are meant for them to wage war against our own citizens. Every time we do that, we're not spending that money on things that could be building up our communities. We're good at destroying things. We need to get much better at building things up and making our communities safer and healthier so that crime would go down, people would feel more sense of community, people would have better jobs, all the things that we would need to live a healthy, safe, equitable existence in this country.
Wow, John, you have given us clear agenda. You've mapped out our progress, and you've given us a sense of hope, not optimism, not that everything's just going to be all right, but a sense of possibility for moving forward. And that's what we need.
If we don't have any hope, then we just descend into nihilism, where we're saying nothing matters, F it all, burn it all down. And that's not the way we're going to achieve any progress. So we have to practice hope. And that means learn from your mistakes, but also get energy from your successes and use that to fuel you forward so you keep going and have the tenacity and the belief that we can keep going and make real progress.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, BET, for hosting this.
Absolutely. And thank you all for watching BET's news special, Justice Now. As John said, we have a lot to be hopeful for, but we also have a lot of work to do moving forward. But we must continue to do the work. Everyone in the streets, continue to be safe, continue to make wise decisions, and please wear masks. Also, everyone out in the world, we have an election coming up in November. We have an opportunity to chart our own course and to change the direction of this nation. For BET News, I'm Marc Lamont Hill.